everybody hear me?
Yes.
Thanks for coming out tonight. I heard Ammon was coming back to town, and I was so excited. So I had a friend that was telling me he was having some trouble, but I just got on the email, and we were able to make it happen. So thanks, Garth, for helping bring Ammon here again. I brought Ammon in the summertime because after watching his videos and doing my own research, as they say.
Hey, Maddie, is there a way to turn that out a little back? Yep.
Can you hear me now? Bye. I can hold it down here. After doing my own research, as we've learned that is really important this last couple years, I just fell in love with a lot of the stances he takes, the risks he takes, and it's been an honor to watch his journey and story this last couple of years and to be a part of it. So thanks for coming in the summer. Thanks for coming back. Definitely time for some change. Definitely time to stir things up in the state of Idaho. So I don't think he needs a whole lot of introduction or explanation. So here he is. Ammon.
Thank you. All right, I'll stand over here. Is that too loud?
No.
Turn it down just a little bit so it doesn't scream at me. All right. If I have to adjust it, just let me know. So way in the back, if you can't hear me before I start talking too quiet, then just raise your hand. But so far, so good. Okay. And you might be getting blown away here. Well, thank you. Thank you for being here, and thank you for caring enough to come find out what things are all about. And thank you for this great venue that is here and made available to us. I hope that we can have a good conversation when we're done. We're all friends, and that we also understand a little bit more what's happening here in Idaho and what is the solutions, because I'm going to hopefully show some things that maybe you've never seen before or heard, and then also present some possibilities of what Idaho can be and should be. And so make sure you order and take care of this wonderful these wonderful business owners here that allow us to be here. Leave some good tips, and let's just have a good night. But first of all, I want to ask you a question. And well, actually, I'm going to ask you just a kind of a preliminary question around. Who here has heard me speak before? Okay, so we've got easily 2/3 of the people here not heard me speak, which is great, because now I know what to say. If you've already heard me before, then I'll talk about something different than I've been talking about. But since the majority of you have not, then I'll stick with what I came to show you. But before I do that, I want to ask you a question. And that question is, what is freedom? What is it? We'll talk a little bit about how we apply it. But just think about it just a little bit, because I have to be honest with you, it took all that happened to my family before I really, even though I was very politically active, I should say, I was active in, having the election season coming and finding a candidate and supporting that candidate, and then voting, and then not doing a whole lot more other than just, raising my family, and I would donate here and there, but I hadn't really thought about what freedom was until I saw what I saw happen to my family. And balance this a little bit there. That's probably a little better. So what is freedom? If you have any idea, raise your hand. I want to know what you think. Maybe right off the bat, I don't know that you can be wrong unless you're a socialist or a communist. Then you may not know any premise of what freedom is. But what is freedom? What is it? Right here.
The ability to make our own choices about our own lives, our bodies, our families.
Okay, so she said the ability to make our own choices about our lives, about our families. so on and so forth. I would definitely have to agree with that. Absolutely. Okay, what else? What is freedom? So we sing about it, right? We believe that we send our servicemen off to fight for freedom. We feel it in our hearts. But what is it? Any other thoughts right here?
Freedom is the ability to do whatever you want, as long as you aren't hurting others, infringing on their rights, or hurting their family, stealing from them.
Okay, did you hear that? Yep. So that is exactly what I believe freedom is. Freedom is the ability to do whatever you want as long as you are not infringing upon another person's rights. Now, think about that. To do whatever you want as long as you're not infringing upon another person's rights. And that freedom is what we fight for. It's what we vote for. It's what we, live for. And it's what this country was founded upon. The ability to do whatever you want as long as you are not infringing upon another person's rights. So let's test this. Because when I move on, I hope to have everybody pretty much convinced that this is the definition of freedom. I don't think I have to go too far here with you two, because you're right on. And maybe not anybody else, because maybe you're like, okay, that's a good definition of freedom. Let's talk about it. So, freedom to worship. Let's apply that. The ability to worship whatever you want, however you want, when you want, as long as you're not infringing upon somebody else's rights, right? So you can't say, I'm going to sacrifice your dog because it doesn't belong to you. And that's where it ends, right? Now, but you can worship a yellow dog if you want. And as somebody said in one of my previous meetings, he said, well, that's probably not a good idea. It might get fleas. And I wouldn't recommend worshiping a yellow dog. But if you choose to, you should have a right to. That should be protected. I don't believe it'll bring you salvation, but you still have that ability on this land. As a person that was born here and given this right to worship how you want to from God, you should be able to do that. So what about freedom to own private property? Let's apply that. To be able to do whatever you want with your property as long as you do not infringe upon your neighbor's rights or somebody else's rights. Right? Are we losing that right?
Yes.
We are, right? We got, this and this and this. They're just layering it on, and it's in every little city, in every little town, in every county, in every state, where we are losing our right to be able to do what we want with our property as long as we're not infringing upon our neighbor's rights. Now we have to get permission to do it. Now they say we have to do this and we have to do that. And it's become a real problem because private property is essential for the preservation of liberty and for the pursuit of happiness. Because you can't, if you don't have a place where you can go and you call your own and you control it and you're safe there, then it's very, very difficult for you to have any type of peace and pursuit of happiness. And in fact, private property has been one of the most attacked things in the entire history of this world. In Europe, our forefathers, many of your forefathers, I don't know your history, but I know mine did, and most people's forefathers fled from Europe to come to America because the American dream wasn't that you can come here and get rich. That's not what the American dream was. The American dream is that you could come to the Americas and own property, that it was yours. Where over in Europe and all the rest of the world, the kings claimed it or the lords claimed it, and you were just a serf. You had to pay them a tribute in order to use a little bit of it. And then if they didn't want you to use it, or if they changed their mind, you would just be out. Well, in the Americas, you could own property. You had the right to own it. You were your own king. And so this is a very important freedom that we need to realize is slipping away from us and fight for it. In fact, Karl Marx said that communism can be summed up into one sentence: the abolition of private property. Think about that. So the abolition of private property, the getting rid of private property, he said, the founder of communism said, that is the summation of communism. And so the freedom of private property is very important. So let's keep applying this. Freedom to publish our thoughts. What do we call that? What in the Bill of Rights? What is that called? No, that's freedom to speak out. What do we call it? It's kind of on the same line, right? Freedom of the press. Correct. Yes. To be able to publish your thoughts, right? To write them and publish them and not have to worry about being prosecuted for it or arrested for it. And what is that freedom? To be able to publish whatever you want as long as you're not infringing upon your neighbor's rights. So let's go down through here. Freedom to travel. Be able to go wherever you want as long as you're not infringing upon someone else's rights. So I can't force you to travel with me. That wouldn't be freedom, right? But I should be able to travel wherever I want as long as I'm not infringing upon someone else's rights. Freedom to trade with each other. I like this one because I'm an entrepreneur at heart. And I feel that people should be free to trade with each other. And in fact, there's some really great examples in history where governments were being so oppressive and they were causing an economic depression in their countries. And so they decided to test something and say, well, we're going to make a free trade zone. Or we'll take this area and we'll just, anything goes. You don't pay taxes, there's no regulation on it. And those areas prosper and just flourish. And they create the most economic increase of any other area. And how is that? It's because free trade. When you're a willing seller and I'm a willing buyer, well, that's what it means. You can sell me what you want as long as I'm willing to buy it. And so freedom to trade whatever you want as long as you're not infringing upon another person's rights. Now, we can go down through this. Freedom to have and raise children. Certainly that is being attacked and has been. Freedom to choose where to live. And freedom to speak out. As said earlier, freedom of speech. So again, I'm going to move on here, but I want to make sure that at least you're understanding and kind of agree, and if not, object to me. I would love to hear your objection. If your definition or you think this definition of freedom is incorrect, let me know. Let's talk about it. Any objections? All right. Don't be scared either. I have no problem answering questions that might be opposing in my view. I have no problem in that. All right. So let's talk about one of the reasons why I'm here. I'm here because I'm running for governor. And I want you to build your confidence enough that you will consider voting for me. And one of the ways I'm going to try to do that is tell you a little bit about my background. But I'm going to go through it pretty quick because I don't want to focus on that other than just giving you a little bit of understanding of who I am, what makes me tick, and even why I've done some of the things I've done. Because if you read like CNN or MSN or ABC or any of those, then it's not quite the right story. And in fact, when I read those, I hate myself. I'm like, man, this guy, whoever this guy is, he's a terrible guy. So I'm gonna go through a little bit about what I believe I really am. So I grew up on the Bundy Ranch in southern Nevada. Here's my parents. I love them very much, and I'm grateful for them. My mother, Carol, grew up in Gooding, Idaho, a few hours away from here. And I was blessed to be raised by good parents who taught me right from wrong, who disciplined me when I needed it, and who taught me when to compromise and when not to compromise. And also how to work and actually do things and the importance of that. My dad made it very clear that nothing is free. Nothing. Either somebody else paid for it, or made it, or created it, or you did. But nothing's free. So I'm grateful for good parents. Here's a picture of the ranch. It's a beautiful, very arid. There's not a lot of vegetation, as you can see. But it is a beautiful place in its own right. Here's a steer on the hill. And you can see there that, my dad runs cattle there. He runs about 700 head of cattle. And it takes about 100 acres to produce enough feed for one cow. And part of the way that they survive out there in the desert, because it'll easily, every summer gets 120 degrees plus, and it's very dry. But we have a water system that my dad and my forefathers have developed that spreads over a 30-mile span of that area so that the cattle can water. They can go out and eat and graze, and then they come back and water. And they come off of 11 springs, and they're just the lifeblood of the ranch. Here's a picture of one of the bulls, and you notice he's got some hair on the end of his horn. He probably just got done hooking the horse, because they're pretty mean. This is my little brother, but this is something I grew up with. It's branding calves, and we had to mostly do it the old-fashioned way, where we roped them and threw them on the ground and branded them and doctored them and then let them go. And I did that, my entire life growing up. Here's a scene, my little sister getting off the bus. We had to drive an hour, a bus ride every day, an hour there and an hour back. We were the first ones on and the last ones off. And this, like I said, is something that, not too unfamiliar to me. And she's got four dogs and a calf that's coming, greeting her as she gets off the bus. And that calf there, my dad actually had to do an emergency C-section on his mother because she got hit on the highway. And so he saved the calf, and the mother died, and then we bottle fed the calf until it ended up being a really nice bull. When I was 19, I went and served a mission. I went to Minnesota and taught people about Jesus Christ. Those were sacred times for me because I feel that I was able to just dedicate a couple years of my life kind of figuring out who I was going to be. It also gave me a lot more refinement, right? I came from the ranch and I was kind of rough and tough, and then I go right into being a missionary. And it gave me a lot of refinement that I'm very grateful for. And I committed to myself during that time that whatever I did, I would do for the Lord. That I would put Him first. And that I always would check what I was doing with that. So no matter what I was doing in business or in whatever I was doing, I was always going to make sure that the Lord would be pleased with it, and it was something that I felt He would want me to do. After that, I went to a little bit of school in Cedar City, Utah, Southern Utah University. I started a business there, and I wondered why I was staying there, because my business took over, so I was just mostly doing business. And I was there in that little town thinking that, if I would go to a little bigger area or a better area for my business, I would do better. But I ended up staying there for 6 years, and the reason why is because I was waiting for somebody. I was waiting for my wife. And finally she come along, and I scooped her up and married her, and then we left just a few months later. And we went down to Arizona, started a life down there, and had a bunch of kids. 6 boys, that'd be a lot. 6 kids, 3 boys, 3 girls. And I also continued my business. I moved it down there, and we lived there for about 14 years. And I built one of the largest private fleet maintenance companies in Arizona. And we serviced, hundreds of commercial trucks. I would contract with them. And I employed, I've hired hundreds of people. I dealt with millions of dollars a year in budgets, and we created lots of processes and procedures, and I built this business from scratch. So it wasn't like anything that I could just, copy or build off of. I built it from scratch. And it ended up being a very, very good business and a great service for, many customers in that area. Here's an article that they wrote about me, not that big a deal, but just kind of giving you some stuff here. And then when I was about 17 years in business or so, I began to really have a need for software for my business, for the industry. And I searched everywhere, and there just wasn't any software to be found. I mean, I really needed it because I was using like 4 or 5 different softwares. I was using a software that was for my finances. I was using software for my employees, for my work orders, and so forth. And I really needed something to be able to put it all together. Couldn't find it, and so one of the things that my dad taught me was if you can't find what you need, or if you can't get a job or you can't find something to make it work, then you can make it yourself. That's what we do here in the United States of America. We produce something, right? So my dad gave me some good advice, and I decided to take it, and we built our own software. And that software took us about 3.5 years to build, and we used our customers and our vendors and our office and all of that, and we put this software together, and it was really a great software. And it worked so well in my shop that we began to sell it to other shops. And now it is one of the leading fleet maintenance shop management softwares in North America. So why do I tell you this? Again, I want to give you a little bit of confidence that even though I had a wonderful experience of being free and living on the ranch, that I went out and had to leave the ranch and to go make a living and provide for my family. And I have done a few other things that helped me to qualify for being a governor. All right, so now life was pretty good. And then in 2014, something happened to my family, my dad on his ranch. And I'm not going to go too far into it because many of you may have known, or you can look into it, but ultimately what happened was the federal government, after almost 150 years of being in business, came and said that they were going to make a mitigation area out of my father's ranch for the desert tortoise. And it was on the endangered species list, and they wanted to make an area where the desert tortoise could live and have that place to themselves. And they didn't like my dad anyway, or the other ranchers in that area, and so they decided that they were going to make my father's ranch and the other ranches around it a mitigation area. Well, my dad had a problem with that. He wasn't going to yield his rights. He had those rights clearly deeded to him. He owned them. And they tried to take them legally. They tried to take them and control the narrative politically. And when they couldn't do that, they sent a 213 army of federal agents down upon our family, snipers around the hills, and they locked up the ranch, and they began to kill the cattle from the helicopters and destroy the water infrastructure that was over 100 years old. They began to drive the mother cows that were so fast with the helicopters, they were leaving the baby calves out in the desert. And they were also destroying some of the corrals and so forth, and just decimating the ranch. And it's hard to explain, but it was like a scene out of the Hollywood movie Red Dawn, because that's just what it was, with MRAPs and helicopters and guards and patrols, and it was on our ranch, and it was really hard to see. And I began to really question like where we were at in this country. And ultimately what was happening to my family then, 8 years ago, is what's happening to everybody now. In the sense that these were our rights. They were our property rights. They'd been in my family for generations, 5 generations, since 1877. And now the government was coming in, particularly the federal government, saying that they weren't rights, that they were privileges. And they're not going to grant us the privilege to be able to use them anymore. And that is exactly what's happening to us. The battle right now of whose rights belong to who is what is raging now. Do you have a right to control your body? We believe that, right? But the government has a hard time understanding that it's our choice. What about our families? How we worship, where we worship, when we worship. These are the struggles that we're going through right now. And some of the questions that we must answer very clearly in the near future, if we haven't already, in order to preserve them. Because let's talk about Idaho. Because Idaho right now is in a battle for its conservative soul. And if you don't know that or haven't thought about it, it's time to kind of look around and start asking, like, what caused Oregon, Washington, California, Nevada, Colorado, New Mexico, all of those very conservative states, what caused those states to become liberal? To the point where now those liberal policies are implemented and so enforced in those states that it's actually destroying their states. So what caused it? And what caused it? And are those things happening right now in Idaho? And we're going to discuss that. But one of those people making the decisions in Idaho are who we need to start looking at closely, because this battle is real. And a lot of the reason for this battle is because of this man and many of the people that he would call his friends, the Good Old Boys Club in Idaho. They've controlled the Idaho politics and the House and the Senate and the governor's office for 4 decades now. And yet we have to go back and see, okay, what has happened? Because Idaho is the first state to arrest people for attending church. I don't know if you remember this in Moscow, Idaho.
Always trust in chariots and others trust in horses, but we recall the Lord of God, strong past our own resources.
This is the pastor. They end up arresting 3 people.
But we are held and upright, so save us, Lord our God.
Think about that. Idaho. Is the right to worship protected in Idaho? Should be, right? Does our Idaho Constitution protect that? Wendy, do you have a Idaho Constitution? I left mine in the RV. I want to read you something. So what about the U.S. Constitution? Does it protect the right to worship? It's the very first line of the very first amendment of the Constitution. And it says that Congress or the government has no right to infringe upon it. So we know that the U.S. Constitution protects it, but what does the Idaho State Constitution say? Because, interesting enough,
always trust in chariots.
These officers right here took an oath. They took an oath to both the U.S. Constitution and to the Idaho Constitution. So the U.S. Constitution clearly forbids officers from arresting pastors for going to church. But what about the Idaho Constitution? So if we go into section 4, it reads, in fact, it's titled, Guarantee of Religious Liberty. The exercise and enjoyment of religious faith and worship shall forever be guaranteed, and no person shall be denied any civil or political right, privilege, or capacity on account of his religious opinion. Okay? And then we go to the very last, well, it's actually second to last section of the Idaho Constitution, and it says this. And these to me are some beautiful words. It says, it is ordained by the state of Idaho that perfect toleration of religious sentiment shall be secured, and no inhabitant, that's you and I, of said state, that be Idaho, shall ever be molested in person or property on account of his or her mode of religious worship. So completely, the state has no jurisdiction whatsoever to ever stop people from worshiping. None. So what's happening here? We have to ask that, because Idaho was the first state to arrest people for attending church during the whole COVID stuff. We were also the first state to arrest a mother for going to the park with her children in Meridian. Remember that? We were also one of the first states to raid a business for not shutting down. And in fact, we have to just keep asking the question, like, what are these officers doing? Why are the police acting like this in Idaho? These are protected rights. They're protected in both the U.S. and the state constitution. So what are they doing? And if we look a little closer, this guy here, he is a Idaho State police officer. He's undercover. And he tells us why. What he's doing is he's bringing a citation into the business owners who, it's a restaurant just about like this. And they decided to stay open. They believed that it was their choice and their right. They believed that they were essential and they had a right to pay their own bills and feed their children and try to keep their business afloat. And they chose to stay open. And so he's coming in here issuing them a citation, warning them that the state's going to use force upon them if they don't close. And he tells you why. It's kind of hard to listen, or it's kind of hard to hear, so hopefully you can hear it. And turn it up just a little bit. And listen to what he says.
Real quick, this is from the state.
Would you say that again, sir? Hand him that letter back.
Now,
I would like to hear him identify himself again.
I'm Jake Schwecken with the Idaho State Police. I'm just delivering this letter in response to you guys opening it, in contrast to the stay-at-home order.
So he's saying, because you open in contrast to the stay-at-home order, I am issuing this letter. So he's telling us why. Because the stay-at-home order doesn't allow you to open, and it's the same reason why the officers were arresting pastors for having church. It's the same reason why they arrested a mother for going to the park and other things. So we also know that a few days later, ISP raided the business and began prosecuting the owners. So again, why are they doing this? Well, the ISP undercover officer told us, because of this man's orders. Because he ordered them to do it. And somehow they have put this man's order over the oath that they took in the Constitution, of the Constitution. Somehow they did that. Now, what form of government are we?
A republic.
We're a republic, but not only a republic, because like China's a republic, right? But we're not like China, so we're not just a republic. We are definitely a republic. What else are we? We're a constitution republic, right? Constitutional republic. Which means what? Republic means we have representatives, right? We're a representative government. We have representatives, but they are bound to this and to the U.S. Constitution. They're bound to it. So we are a constitutional republic. So this man doesn't have authority to just issue whatever he wants. He has boundaries, and those boundaries are found in the Constitution. So that's what type of government we are. Now, we may want to give him a little bit of a slack, right? We may want to give him some slack. I mean, he may have saved Idaho from this terrible, terrible pandemic, right? He may have done what he was doing because of the health and safety of Idahoans. So let's just give him that benefit of the doubt, okay? So I'm going to show you a few things so you can answer for yourself whether he did it for the health and safety of the people of Idaho or if he did it for some other reason. Because March 13th was the first day the date that he put the state of Idaho in emergency status. Do you remember that?
Yes.
He put the state of emergency in place in Idaho. And that was on March 13th. Remember that day? Well, interesting enough, on March 13th was the same day that President Trump announced that he was releasing $50 billion in federal funds to states in emergency status. Okay, on March 13th. Now, maybe we were in emergency status. I mean, maybe Idaho was really in a terrible situation at that time. But the problem is if you look on the governor's own website on March 13th, he says that there was only one confirmed COVID case. One case. We're a state of almost 1.8 million people. And we have one case, and he says it's an emergency. And it just so happens to be the same day that Trump says if you're in a state of emergency, you can get billions of dollars of this money. Now, he then a few days later put us in an extreme state of emergency. Remember that? On March 25th. He put us in an extreme state of emergency. Now, maybe we were in an extreme state of emergency. However, interesting enough, on March 25th, that was the same day that Nancy Pelosi and President Trump agreed on a $2 trillion federal package for states that were in extreme state of emergency. Okay? We had 136 unconfirmed cases in Idaho on that day. Now, maybe we still have a question of what his motives are, but he begins to tell us in his own orders. He says here, this is a proclamation and securing millions of dollars in funds. I put the state in the state of emergency, then an extreme state of emergency, and then remember this section right here, 46601. We're going to talk about this a little bit. So just put it in the back of your mind. This is the authority he says I'm using in the state code. He says I'm using this authority, 46601 and 461008. That's the authority I'm using to put the state in emergency, extreme and a state of emergency. He goes on and he thanks President Trump for $1.25 billion. Says thank you, and I'm looking for more. And then here is an interesting, this is Executive Order 2020-07. And he says, whereas I issued a proclamation on March 13, 2020, declaring a state of emergency in the state of Idaho, whereas I issued a proclamation on March 25, 2020, declaring a state of extreme emergency in the state of Idaho, whereas Congress has passed and President Trump has signed 3 legislative packages that provide state funding in response to COVID-19. Whereas I anticipate additional congressional actions on federal relief packages to states regarding COVID-19. So it's like, we've got a bunch of money and there's more money coming, right? Then he goes on the next page. Now therefore, I, Brad Little, Governor of the state of Idaho, do hereby order the creation of a COVID-19 Financial Advisory Committee comprised of members appointed by and serving at the pleasure of the governor. So what is he doing right here? He says we're going to get all this money. We're going to get billions of dollars from the federal government, and we've got billions of dollars, and we're going to get more. We're anticipating a bunch more, and me and my buddies are going to get together, and we're going to create a committee. And I get to appoint the people in that committee, and they serve me. The governor says they serve me at my pleasure. So I get to, decide who's on the committee, and they all serve me at my pleasure. Okay? Now, then he says, for the coronavirus, this is the last page, there's just 3 pages, I showed you all 3. For the coronavirus relief funds and other funds to be administered by the office of the governor. So he says, all that money we're going to bring into the office of the governor, and me and my buddies who serve at my pleasure are going to decide where that money's spent, and we're going to spend it out of the office of the governor. Now, how are the funds of Idaho supposed to be administered? Who is supposed to administer them? Who? Speak up. Someone said it. The legislature, right? The legislature is supposed to spend the money from the state. Why would it be the legislature, not the office of the governor? Why did we, in the Constitution, make it, and in our state codes, make it so the legislature is the one who authorizes and administers the funds of the state? Why? Right here.
Because they're the closest to the people.
They represent the people, right? Exactly. So we elect local people they go over there, and together they all have to agree on how the state funds are spent. And that way, not a small group of people are able to spend the money how they want to, or it could be, used inappropriately, or it can be, there could be corruption, and it's supposed to stop that. And you know what? It does a pretty good at stopping that. Pretty good job. Because there's a whole bunch of people that we elected that go there, and they all together all have to agree on where the money and how the money's going to be spent. But what happened right here? He bypassed that. He put it in the very circumstances in which the people forbid, which is to allow a small group of people to decide how the state funds are being spent. Now, maybe we're only talking about a little bit of money here, right? I mean, maybe the federal government, got tight and they stopped printing money, and maybe it's only a little bit of money. But I'm here to tell you it's $18 billion. $18 billion. That's over 2 times the annual state budget. And he took it into his office with him and his buddies that serve at his pleasure, and they get to decide by themselves without any legislative oversight, without any of our representatives even having any say about it. He completely cut the people and their representatives out of the process. And he's spending it however he wants to, him and his buddies. So there's a problem there, right? There's a really big problem there. Now, that's not the only problem. Get a drink here. I wish it was. And we don't have time here, and I'd have to do like a 6-hour seminar before I could go through everything that I could just touch on everything that has happened. But there's some other very concerning things that happen, because remember, our founders' belief was that power should not be consolidated, right? Power should not be consolidated. They believed that power is most safe and distributed among all the people. That would include private property, the resources, funds, all of that. So everything they did was to get the power distributed, especially among the people. And when we see what we see right now in many of our government, well, all of our governments, is they're trying to consolidate the power. Because it's easier to control, it's easier to manage, but it's also easier to abuse. And so let's talk about a little bit more about a few things that Governor Little did here. So we know the legislature is supposed to spend the funds. And we also know, remember that code that I told you about, the 46601? Well, here it is. It's titled 46, Militia and Military Affairs. Chapter 6, Martial Law and Active Duty. That's an interesting title. 46601, Authority of the Governor. So he used this authority upon the people of Idaho, never been used before, ever. And in particular, I want you to pay attention to section 2, because it says, during a period of state of extreme emergency, remember he put us in, he himself decided to put us in a state of extreme emergency. And so during this state of extreme emergency, the governor shall have complete authority over all agencies of the state government, including all separate boards and commissions, and the right to exercise within the area, that'd be the state, all policing power vested in the state. So what did he just do? He just took it's not me saying it. Like, let's go back to the good. He just took authority over all agencies of the state government, including all separate boards and commissions, and the right to exercise within the area of the regions in the state, all policing power. That's what he did when he implemented these emergency orders. He consolidated all the powers of government into himself. And now he has all the funding that he needs. And what do we call that? What do we call that? We call it a dictatorship, right? A monarchy. And in fact, James Madison said, when all branches of government are held under one body, it is the very definition of tyranny. Those are not my words. And I'm not the one that wrote this. And I'm not the one that implemented it. I'm just showing you what he did. I'm showing you what he did with all the money, what he's doing with all the money, and what he did with the power of Idaho. And then he began to push down. In fact, if you read this order right here, this is the self-isolation order that he put in place on March 25th, the same day he put us in extreme state of emergency. And he says, this order, so now I'm king, I took all the powers, right? And I have all this money. This order, so now he's going to issue an edict. This order directs all individuals living in the state of Idaho to self-isolate at their place of residence. So he's telling you and I that we don't have authority to go outside our homes without his permission. That's what he's saying. That we have to self-isolate. And we can only come out for specific reasons that he gives us permission for. He also tells business owners that they have to close down, that they can't, if he says they're non-essential, then they have to close down if they're non-essential. Well, I think that, this business here is pretty essential to the family that owns it, right? It's quite essential. But he's saying, nope, I decide who's essential and who's not. And if you're not essential on my list, you have to close down, or I'm going to send Idaho State Police, my standing army, to come and raid and arrest you. He also says, I'm directing all businesses, government agencies. Okay, we did that. We said that, but he says right here, prohibiting all non-essential gatherings of any number of individuals. Well, I thought I read somewhere that we have a right to assemble. I thought I read somewhere where we have a right to worship. And yet, how does that, I don't understand how that can coincide with this. He's prohibiting all non-essential gatherings. Did he dedicate church services as essential? No, he didn't. But even if he did, it didn't matter. He doesn't have the authority to do that. But he thinks he does. He also says he's ordering the cessation of all non-essential travel. You can't travel without my permission. And this is what he did in Idaho. 2 Idahoans. This is what he did. And just to make sure that you know his intent, right? Because just to make sure, on January 7th, 2022, how many days ago was that? Not very long ago? He says that a state of emergency described in 461008 Idaho Code exists in the state of Idaho. He wanted to make sure that you knew that the emergency order, emergency powers that he's holding on to, he still is holding on to them right now. Okay? So I'm not talking about something that happened 2 years ago in 2020. I'm talking about right now. I'm talking about that at any moment he could say that what we're doing here is illegal. And he could send the Idaho State Police in and arrest us. Now, that didn't happen so much in Idaho, although I showed you how it did happen and how they tried to implement it, right? But why is Idaho different? Anybody move from California? Oh, maybe don't raise your hand. No, just kidding. No. Hey, I have been very, very open that there is a tremendous amount of people moving from California that are solid people that understand what happens to a state when these liberal, wicked people control it. And so I welcome you. I welcome you. We don't want California here. I don't think you want California here. That's why you've come here. So, but I want to ask you a question. You have family or anybody in California that you know? Does California look a lot different than Idaho? Looks a tremendous. Oregon looks a lot different. Washington looks a lot different. Nevada looks a lot different. I mean, you don't see very many people's faces, right? And they're pushing. I mean, I think there's a certain date where you can't even take your kids to public school unless they've been vaccinated. They have a deadline. Is that correct, Riley? Yeah, in California. So why is Idaho different? It's not because Governor Little didn't try to do it. In fact, I just showed you. In fact, we followed what Governor Newsom was doing, Governor Inslee, Governor Brown, and many others, and we saw how Governor Little was following and doing the same thing. He was implementing the same type of executive orders. He was following the very same thing, but yet somehow Idaho is different. We're way, way more free here. Why?
Most of us have firearms.
I said most of us have firearms. Well, there's quite a few firearms in California, but I mean, I think you're getting somewhere, right? You're kind of hitting on the same type of thing. But why is Idaho different?
Pushing back.
Yeah, the people did not comply. He tried to do it. He tried to implement it, but the people didn't comply. It took us a little while. We had to get up our courage, right? You know, I was out in 2020. I got arrested 6 times. And the whole reason was I was like, people, the only way we will win this is by standing up to it. And people started catching on. They started catching on, and they started standing up. And moms started getting arrested at the park, and people started getting arrested at the wherever, or they were just pushing back. And pretty soon they started saying, look, this is going to be a terrible thing, because the people are starting to push back. So they started to back off. And now it opened the state up. And we were able to pretty much live the way we want to live, in peace, in tranquility, even under these orders that he's saying are still in place. And he tells us pretty clearly why he wants those in place, and because he still wants to get federal funding. Still wants that federal money. And he's not very happy about us not complying to his orders. He's not, but what can he do about it? When you got a whole state of people that believe in freedom. What is freedom? That they have the right to decide when they're going to go outside their home. That they have the right to decide when they're going to open their business and close their business. That they have the right to decide when they're going to go to church. And so he understands that. Even though he might not like it, now he's going to just get what he can out of it. He's going to suck the federal government for as much money as he possibly can, and him and his buddies are going to spend it however they want. And that's basically where we're at right now. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about it. What's that?
How much are they embezzling themselves?
Yeah, I don't know. There is something interesting that we found, and that is that he's now raised over $1 million for his campaign, just like right off the bat. And we can see a trace where the bureaucracies, so like the heads of the bureaucracies, say the department of this or department, and he appointed these heads. And he is funneling this money into their departments, right? Giving them tons of budget, and they're increasing their wages. Everybody's getting a bonus, and all of these things are happening. And then they're donating back to Governor Little's campaign in the full amount that they can. And so, yeah, it's completely legal, right? Because they're giving it to the department. The department are raising the wages of the individuals, giving a bonus, and then they have enough money now they can thank Brad Little for all his energy and efforts and getting them great jobs and great wages. And so they want him in as governor. So they donate back to him. Completely legal, I guess, but definitely happening. What else? What are you concerned about? What are your thoughts about what I just shared with you, or otherwise? What are your concerns?
What would you have done differently?
That's a great question. What would I have done different? I would have used the state to become a very reliable source of accurate information. I would have distributed that to the people and made it available to them, and then the people get to make their own decisions. So they have reliable, accurate information that is produced by the state that they can rely on and depend upon. And then they can make their own decisions of whether they're going to keep their business open, or whether they're going to go to church or not, or whether they're going to wear a mask. Yes.
You said what you would do, but would you have accepted the money?
No. So, yeah, so she asked, would have I accepted money? Absolutely not. In fact, it is the federal money that has caused this whole entire thing. When you pump trillions of dollars into businesses and then you require them to follow your mandates, to states, to health districts, to counties, even county sheriffs, to school districts. You pump that money in, and then everybody who takes even a dime has to agree to the requirements. And you're talking about trillions of dollars. You just created something that is way, way bigger than what it ever would have been. This probably without federal funding would have been like a bad flu season. That's about all it would have been. It would have been a bad flu season. And we would have got through it. We would have, we would have dealt with it, and it wouldn't have been a big deal. But as soon as you pump trillions and trillions of dollars in basically marketing that, I mean, hospitals, if they brought in a patient and they declared the patient a COVID patient, they got $13,000 just because of that. If they put them on a ventilator, they got $39,000. We were paying the hospitals to promote it and to push it and to give all their numbers about COVID. And then we were paying them to put them on a ventilator, which is pretty much a death sentence. So, no, we can't. We have to sever this flow of federal money coming down into Idaho. We have to sever it. In fact, I want to show you something. Okay, if I can find it here. I got it here somewhere, but I think this is it. Nope, that's an interesting one, but that's not it. Okay, this is where Idaho gets its money. Okay, this is and this is from the Department of Revenue. This is not my graph. So you see here the general funds, that would be taxes and so forth, 43%. 20% comes from dedicated funds. That would be like fuel tax and so forth. And then over 36% of the money that we receive or use comes from the federal government. Every single dime of that comes with strings attached to it. Every single dime. This is just the state. I'm not talking about the county. I'm not talking about the cities. This is just the state. So you can see over a third of our budget comes from the federal government. And we are dependent upon it. Yeah.
Yes, the government controls 60% of our land.
Boy, you're right on top of it. Yeah. So
Why shouldn't they compensate for the taxes that a private landowner would have been paid?
okay, so think about this. So she says, but over 60% of our land is controlled by the federal government. And she's right. I'm going to show you something here. I got to get back to this though. So, yeah, so 60% of our land is controlled by the federal government. It's actually 61. It's 63 if you count the reservations and the military bases, but reservation and military bases are constitutional. So 61% of our land is controlled by the federal government. Now, how is wealth created? Anybody? Is a farmer here? Yes.
Didn't Hoover do something when he super protected our forests, basically all over the U.S.?
It was Roosevelt. Yeah. That was kind of the origination of this. But so, wealth is created from the land and the resources, right? All wealth originates from the land and the resources. You plant a seed, you plant one seed, it grows up, and it becomes many seeds. It has, say, like I got a little apple orchard, grows up, and one seed will produce a whole bunch of apples, and then you can sell those apples. And you have to connect the land and the resources with your labor, and that's how wealth is generated. Well, what we have right now is where 61% of our land we can't use as a state. The federal government is keeping it out of our hands. And so we can't even pay our own bills. So then, what do we have to do? We have to beg the federal government to give us money. But the problem is they don't give it just for free. They have strings attached to it. And every bit of this COVID money, every bit of it came with the requirement that Governor Little or the county or the health districts or the school districts, every bit of it came with the requirement that they push the mandates that the White House pushes down. They were called the White House profiles. And they had to, still today, they have to, if the White House says mask, they have to start pushing masks. If they say vaccination, they have to start pushing vaccination. If they say whatever it is, that is what the federal government requires for money. So you can see how, unless we get our lands back, Idaho will never be free. It'll never be independent. It will always be dependent on the federal government. And we will always have to go to the federal government and ask them for money in order to pay our own bills. And it got so bad that the counties began to go, look, we can't even function because you're controlling so much of our land. We just had a Republican women's meeting in Valley County yesterday, and 92% of the land is controlled by the federal government. Well, the commissioners are like, we can't pay our own bills, and there's no place for people to build their homes. We can't harvest our own forests. We can't do any of that. We cannot survive economically without our lands and our resources. And so that is a real problem. Not only that, see, the white is private property, private or state, the white. And what is that white? Why is it white and why is the other red? Go ahead.
The federal government controls all the red land.
Yeah, and the white is private property. But why is it white like that though? Why? Anybody know? It's because the people 100 plus years ago came and claimed it. And the white is the agricultural land because that's what people came and developed first. They came and developed it, they claimed the area, and it wasn't till later, clear in the 70s, 80s, early 60s, 1960s, 70s, 80s, it wasn't until later the federal government came in and said, look at all this unclaimed land. And they began to claim it themselves. And then they stopped new claims on the land. And that's how it now is in the control of the federal government. It's unconstitutional, and it must be stopped because what's happening is we have an affordable housing crisis, right? I mean, the average home in Idaho now is $400,000, a little over $400,000. In the cities, it's $550,000, the average home. So we've outpriced our ability to, own a home in Idaho compared to the wages. And so and it's a supply and demand problem. So we're trying to build as many homes as we can, but where are we building them on? On our farmland, our agricultural land. We're destroying our #1 industry in Idaho. Why? Because we have to have homes to build upon or live in. So we're building on the agricultural land when we have great other land right around these hills and valleys and so forth around these towns that we could be developing on and saving our #1 industry. But we were not allowed because the federal government won't let us. Yeah, go ahead.
How come so much of our BLM land is being sold to outside independent owners, private owners? There's areas up in Valley County, Adams County, Mud Creek area, up here in Cypress, that used to be BLM land, is now owned by the private owners from like Texas and stuff, and they won't let you go on there and hunt anymore. It's all changed.
Yeah, so she's bringing up a reality, and I know she says, how much of our, and I'm going to say federally controlled land, I do not say BLM land. It is not BLM land. I don't say U.S. Forest Service land. I say federally controlled land because it is being controlled by them, but the land belongs to the people of Idaho. But she says that how come so much of this BLM land is being sold off to private people and not particularly of people of Idaho?
Yeah, and we didn't even know it was for sale. It was being done behind our backs.
Right. Well, that's what we call corruption. And that's the reason why we didn't want our lands and resources consolidated into one power, into one body. Because then they start, scratching each other's back, making deals with each other. And now we have, where these, pretty much these extreme environmentalists are coming in, taking up, they're doing it with a lot of the private land too. They're coming in, buying up a ton of private land, and they're keeping it out of the people's hands.
Is any of it like with the windmills over in Oregon? A lot of that, those places are owned by Japan, so people from out of the country have come in and bought
Yeah.
rights to it.
Yeah, the federal government makes a deal with Japan or China or one of the others that they could come in. And in fact, so remember at the very beginning, so she's, again, concerned about these lands being controlled by out-of-country companies or even the governments out of the state or country governments, and that is a reality. In fact, remember at the very beginning I said that the federal government wanted to turn my father's ranch into a desert tortoise mitigation area. Well, you know why? Because 80 miles away, the federal government, Harry Reid, had made a deal with a Chinese corporation, which is the basically Chinese government, to come in and develop the largest solar farm in the world. Well, the environmentalists were like, well, if you're going to do that, then we have to have a place for all the desert tortoise to live. And so they decided that they were going to take all the desert tortoise from that area, 80 miles from my dad's ranch, and put them on my dad's ranch and make it a mitigation area and drive all the ranchers off the land. So that's the reality. And just one more reason why it is very important that Idahoans fight this battle and get these lands back into our hands. And that is a fight that I will fight. And that is a fight that I intend. So right here, and then back there.
As governor, what do you propose that you can do to prevent and stop all these things that you're discussing, laying out for us here tonight?
So we're going to take back our lands, okay? And I know that might sound easy, so I'm going to explain it. But we are going to take back our lands. They belong to us. The federal government has no constitutional right or authority to hold these lands away from us. And what's been happening now is the states have allowed the federal government to come down on families like my family in the desert, trying to defend our own rights on these lands. And the state will say, well, we're going to take a neutral position. Well, I'm sorry, it's not a neutral position when you've got a ranching family with very limited resources just trying to survive, and you got the federal government, the largest government ever known to man, with the most robust legal team ever known to man, all the resources they need, and they're attacking this little family. And the states are supposed to stand in between and say, no, you're not going to do that. Now, how are we going to do this? It's very simple. I haven't forgotten. Very simple. This land, if you go to the county recorder's office and you take a section, you look at our county, it's all broken up into sections, right? Or into parcels, actually. It's parcels, not sections. It was sections, now it's parcels. So it's parcels, right? It's all broken down, and they all are all named, even the red land. You have to ask, well, why is the federal, if it's federal land, then why is the county breaking it up into parcels? Well, if you go to that parcel that's all red, and you go to look at who the owner is, you'll see that maybe on the website or something, it'll say like BLM. But go down to the county recorders and ask him or her for a title. And what are they going to tell you? Any idea? There is no title. They're going to tell you there is no title because it's unappropriated land. And the state and the county have power to appropriate land. And we're going to exercise that power. And we're going to appropriate this land back to the state, back to the county, and back to the people. And it's just that simple. All right, right here.
How are you going to reverse what Little has done? You pointed out really well, like all these things that Little has done with the money and all this stuff and the group of people. How are you going to change that?
Well, on day one, I'll end the emergency order.
Awesome.
Whatever money's left, I'll package it up, send it back to the federal government, and I will nullify all the mandates that they required by that money. And then I will hunt down these paths that are coming from the federal government to like school boards, our own little school boards, that are requiring them to implement federal curriculums, all of these things, or to our sheriff's departments. And I will sever that. I will sever that flow of money coming from the federal government down into our governments and our towns and our corporations and even to our health districts. I will sever that. And we will begin to stand on our own. We'll take back these lands immediately. We will see a tremendous increase in economics. We will see our housing costs drop to where they should be, where our children can then have homes. I mean, I've got my oldest daughter just got married a few months ago. And yeah, they're going to school and they're not in a position right now to need much of a home. But eventually they will. And right now they're looking at the possibility of never owning a home in Idaho. I mean, that's a real possibility. That practically with the wages and income and so forth of Idaho, they will never. So what are they going to have to do? They're going to have to leave Idaho in order to own a home where they can raise their family, or they got to be a renter for the rest of their lives. Well, I'm not okay with that. I don't think you are either. So those are some things I will do right here.
Yes, sir. I know this is a little off topic, but is there anything you can do to help the National Guardsmen that are getting kicked out because they are refusing the vaccine?
Yeah, absolutely. So the National Guard in Idaho, who is the chief officer of the National Guard? Who's that? The governor is. They will, I mean, it's completely his authority to say no to these things. And that's what I'll do. It's just very simple. They will not be required to get vaccinations. They will not be required to follow these COVID mandates. They won't. But why is Governor Little pushing these things down upon the National Guard and everywhere else? Why is he doing that? Yeah, he took $18 billion of the federal money, and he agreed to the memorandums of understandings. So absolutely, that will be severed. It'll be their decision of what they will do with their bodies. I mean, imagine what we're doing to our military. I mean, think about it. Anybody who has any type of love for freedom, any type of belief that it is their right to decide what they do with their body, they're driving out of the military. And who is that going to leave? That's just going to leave a bunch of people that are just order takers. No matter what, they'll obey the orders. And that is a very, very dangerous military for the world and for us. Very dangerous. Because there's always been people that says, look, no, I'm not going to do that. That's always been a very, very important piece of those in the military, saying no to their superior officers because they won't go that far. And now they're getting rid of them. They also take an oath to the Constitution. Okay, I have right here and then right there. Yep. Go ahead. You're up. Yep. You're right there.
Well, you answered my other question about the federal government, but it's a little off topic. What is your feeling on the Convention of States?
Okay, Convention of States, Article 5 is certainly an authority that the states have to be able to convene and to change the Constitution, to be able to rein in the federal government if it ever got out of control, right? If it ever got out of control. But my concern is this. I do not see a body of states, statesmen, governors, whatever else, that are ever going to be able to go into a convention and come out with something better than the Constitution we have. And that's my fear, that they would go and convene within their authority of Article 5 of the Constitution, go convene, and we'd come out with just a mess. Because right now the problem is not the Constitution. The problem is the enforcement of the Constitution. They're not following it. They're not following it. So that's my concern. That's where I'm at with the Convention of States. All right. Did you want to follow up? Go ahead. Oh, hang on. Hold on. I'm going to give him I can tell he's concerned. Go ahead and.
Well, I'm with the Convention of States, and I think it's very important, and I think you ought to learn a little bit more about it.
I'll do that. Thank you. Right here.
And what would you do about all the good old boy syndrome that goes on in our small town, the government here, the state, in the cities? You get into the small towns, and there's so much super stuff that's going on, maybe corruption and everything else. What would you do about your government?
So I wouldn't do anything that was outside my authority. I would not do that. Otherwise, I'd be a hypocrite. However, again, what needs to be enforced in Idaho is the Idaho Constitution. It is a good law, and the United States Constitution is a good law, and we need to enforce it, and the state needs to enforce it. Now, I'll make this statement, and then I'm going to wrap up. I could spend 4 to 8 years in the office of the governor here in Idaho and never once legislate or even have my door open to the legislature. And just all I do is work on diminishing the power and influence of the executive branch. Because that's where the bureaucracies are. That's where the bureaucracies, and that's where the agencies are, and that's where most of the abuses that the people are experiencing are happening, is within the executive agency, the executive bureaucracies in the state of Idaho. So I could spend 4 to 8 years just stripping down those powers, pushing them back to the legislature, pushing them back on the people, and sit there and never legislate one law and do the people of Idaho a tremendous amount of good. Tremendous amount of good. Now, I plan on working with the legislature. The legislature needs a tremendous amount of leadership. They need direction. They need vision. They need to be able to see, this is what's going on, this is where we're going, and I believe the governor can provide that, along with the people pushing and saying, look, this is what we want. We support the governor in this. And with the governor leading and the people pushing and demanding that the state constitution and the executive agencies are put under control, we could do a tremendous amount of good here in Idaho. But I will say this, it's going to be a battle. Every bit of this is going to be a battle. Fighting the federal government back to get these lands is going to be a battle. Stripping the powers of the bureaucracies is going to be a battle. None of it will be easy. But we still have a chance to do it here in Idaho. And it's going to take a stalwart people and good leadership to do that are not willing, or that are not willing to compromise, and that will actually fight and take this on. And I guess that's all I really have to offer you. That's what I have to offer you. I'm willing to fight a little longer, right? I'm willing to fight a few more years for the people of Idaho. And hopefully we can strip this and restore the power back to the people. So, right here and then right here.
Okay, you mentioned basically the reason we are where we're at is because people are not abiding by the law, the state constitution or the federal constitution, correct?
Right.
Okay.
The state that we're in their country, and we're in this state.
Right. Who is the number one law enforcement officer?
So he asked, who is the number one law enforcement officer? Well, there's 44 of them in Idaho.
Right.
And they're the county sheriff.
Exactly.
And they have a duty to enforce and protect the people according to the Constitution.
So they have more power than the governor.
They have more power in their county to enforce the laws and protect the people according to the Constitution than anybody else. than the governor, than the FBI, than the Idaho State Police, than any city police, because the people give them, the policing gives the sheriff policing and arresting power, and then he deputizes whoever he needs. And that's the way that you hold your policing agencies, your law enforcement, accountable to you. You elect them, and you hold them accountable.
So to me, they are extremely important in the plan that you're talking about.
They are. And that is why, I have maintained that position and worked with the sheriffs. And in anything I've done, whether it's at the ranch, whether it's in Malheur, whether it's any of the things that we've gone on, even in Ravalli County, in Montana, any of those issues that I've been involved in, if you look closely, you'll see the very first person that I go to every single time is the county sheriff.
Why isn't he here tonight?
I don't know. We need to get him here next time. So, my friends, I'm going to wrap this up. I just want to tell you that Idaho, and maybe I don't need to tell you this, but Idaho is a beautiful state. Okay, I need to close though.
I think we need to tell everybody that they need to do research, who they're voting, or just check out the Republican candidate. You need
Thank
to
you.
know what their policies are before you vote for someone.
So, she brings up a good point, then I'll wrap up. That we need to be more responsible voters. We need to be responsible of who we vote for. Because just because they have an R next to their name doesn't mean they're a good candidate. And in fact, Republicanism and conservatism, if you want to call it that, is not the same thing. Just because you're a Republican doesn't mean you're a conservative. They're completely different things. And we see that there is a good old boys club in Idaho that has controlled Idaho for 40 years, 40 plus years. And yet, so just to kind of bring it home, the Republican Party, who has a righteous platform of abolishing abortion, minimizing the size of government, lowering taxes, becoming independent from the federal government, not putting forth welfare and so forth to make people dependent. These are all things that are in the Republican platform, right? However, in the last 4 decades, we haven't put those platforms forth at all in Idaho. Even though the Republicans have had control of the House, the Senate, and the governor's office. Why are we not the most conservative state ever? Why? It's because we have rhinos, Republican in name only. They do not believe in the Republican platform, and we have voted them in year after year, decade after decade, and they have controlled our Idaho government, and they have not made Idaho the most conservative state in the United States. And we are not the shining example of freedom that we should be, that the world needs. Because again, kind of wrapping things up, Idaho is a beautiful place. It's a beautiful land. And the people of Idaho are beautiful people. But not only that, Idaho is and should be and must be a beautiful idea. It must be a land and a place that people look to for the example of freedom, to be free, to be prosperous, to be happy. Idaho must become that. We must become a refuge from the outside world for a place for people to come and be able to worship how they want to worship, live how they want to live, work where they want to work, trade with each other how they want to trade. And the only limit that should be on us is that we are not to infringe upon our neighbor's rights. We must be that example, and boy, is it a needed example in the world. The world needs an example of how to be free, prosperous, and how to live. And I believe that Idaho should be that and must be that. It must become that refuge. And so I thank you for your time. I know I got a question here, but I want to end and then I'll answer your question real quick, because I don't want to hold everybody here too long. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your listening to me and your questions and thoughts. I appreciate it very much. Thank you. All right, those of you who want to sneak out, that's fine. I'll answer them. You got a question right here?
Yes, sir. So, my name's Mason Gillette, been in the U.S. Army for 6 years.
Thank you.
So I want to expand upon the question that this gentleman had. The federal government has pushed out their National Guard soldiers that the states that are refusing to get vaccinated are losing their federal funding. Which brings me to my second part of this question. On your website, in your campaign, you state that you want to eliminate income tax and property tax. How do you propose to pay these soldiers if the federal government is going to deny funding? You know, like the state of Washington and the state of Texas in your sightings in your website, and the lack of property tax, income tax,
Thank you.
and such. You know, the state of Washington has a 33% increase compared to ours in the sales tax. What is your proposition to pay these soldiers that refuse to get vaccinated?
Okay, so first of all, there's twofold. What's happening right now is, let's say you have $1 million, but you can only use 39% of it, right? And if we can get control and access of our land and resources, the economic boom in Idaho would be very similar to what happened in the early ages of this country. And in fact, because when we first formed this country, we became so wealthy because the state was just protecting the right to use it, right? They were just protecting that right. And in fact, by 1905, the people in the United States made up about 6% of the world's population, but we produced over 50% of the world's goods. We're the most wealthy nation. And so just taking back our lands and resources is going to make a huge economic boost in Idaho. Huge. I mean, it's you can't even imagine what kind of economic boost that it will bring. So then people ask me all the time, because I am planning on eliminating property tax. But the very first question is well, how are we going to pay for the legitimate purposes of government? Like our sheriff. That's a very, in our National Guard, although I don't know how much of the property tax goes to them, but we certainly know that our sheriffs are paid for that, our assessors, and all the things that we enjoy. Well, not only enjoy, we need for local government. So let me just break this down to you, because right now what's happening is the $400,000 home, which is the average home in Idaho, the average person per year is paying anywhere from $2,000 to $3,000. It's going up tremendously though, but $2,000 to $3,000, and that depends on the county. So the tax collected in a 30-year period is $60,000 to $90,000. So keep that. So you go 30-year period, the state collects $60,000 to $90,000. But what's the problem with our current tax system?
Pay after you die.
You never own your home. You remember what the communism is? It can be summed up into one sentence: the abolition of private property. Well, property tax is partial implementation of a communist idea. That's what it is. And people are losing their homes every day in Idaho because either they're elderly or they get disabled or they lose their job for a period of time and the state takes it. And in fact, in the 30s during the Great Depression, more people lost their homes to the state because they couldn't pay their property tax than they did to the banks. So think about that. So it is a huge problem, and we need to protect our right to private property. We need to stop allowing the state to levy our properties for obedience or for money. So I am proposing that we replace the property tax system with a consumption tax based upon the sale of property. So let's take this same home, $400,000 home, And let's just, for easy math, say that we're going to put a 5% consumption tax on it. Meaning that when the home sells, the purchaser would pay 5%. Okay? That would be $20,000. They would pay that to the county, to the state, at the time of sale. They could roll it into their mortgage, or they could pay it out of pocket, whatever they wanted. They could even negotiate that the seller pays it, but it would be due at the time of the sale. Now, if you take that $20,000, that seems like a far cry from $60,000 to $90,000, right? But you have to calculate that the average home sells 3 to 5 times in a 30-year period in Idaho. So that would bring in revenue to the state over a 30-year period of $60,000 to $100,000. It would completely replace the funds coming in for property tax. Completely replace it. But the difference is once you pay the mortgage or once you pay the tax, the home is yours. The home is yours. And the state can't levy it or take it. And you don't pay it until you die. And so it still funds the legitimate purposes of government, yet we own our homes. Now there's only one negative, and I'm going to point it out because we broke this down in many different ways. There's only one negative, and that is the $20,000, if you put it into a mortgage, is you're going to have to pay interest on it. That's the only negative. But to me, that's well worth it when you're talking about the ability to truly own and control your property. All right. Right, go ahead.
I'd like to expand upon that.
Okay.
Well, I agree that, yes, the only negative is paying interest on it. What of the people that currently have mortgages?
Yeah. So there'll have to be a graduation period of 5 to 7 years while we move into this. So new home purchases, new property purchases will immediately begin to do it this way. Existing homes will pay their property tax for 5 to 7 years, and then that'll be the cutoff. And that's the way it'll work. And that way it gets the revenue going for the county and the state for a 5 to 7 year period of time, and then now it can stand on its own. Now there's another great benefit to this too, because let's say we open up these lands to get some of this development going so that our children can have homes, right? Or whatever reason, we start to open up this land. Well, immediately the county will receive the money up front. So now they can do roads, infrastructure, and all that without having to go to the federal government and get bonds that come with conditions or borrow money that might last, some of these bonds last 50 years. So the county will be able to pay for the development of these lands as they're being developed up front, rather than having to take out a loan and slowly pay those loans or those bonds. So, right here.
How are we going to win the primary against Region?
How are you going to win?
How are you
You're going to vote for me.
How are you winning? How are we going to make
This isn't up to me. I'm just one
How do
vote.
I help you win?
You just did it. You just did it right here. You filled the room, and we've had a good conversation, and we're doing this almost every night. And we're having these conversations, and people are understanding what needs to happen. And we're seeing the momentum. We're seeing that. And so there's several other things that we have in play that we're going to be working on and that we'll be announcing. But we cannot allow this establishment to continue to control Idaho. Otherwise, I got you back here. Otherwise, we will become an Oregon. I mean, we are on the same path. I'll just give you a little bit of it. I know I got to wrap this up. You've been really patient with me. But think about this. Governor Little, Idaho, in Governor Little's time, has increased its food stamps program more than any other state in the United States. Almost 25%, 24.5%, more than any other state in the United States. He's also designated $200 million of this COVID money for government housing. And they're implementing programs where they're actually having drug assistance programs. It's going to create dependency. It's going to attract a whole bunch of people here that we really don't want here. And Idaho just needs to be different. We don't believe in welfare. We believe in charity. Where you take your money because you were prosperous, because the government only did their job and God blessed you. You take that money and you help your neighbor out with it. You don't give it up by the point of the gun to the state, and then the state decides who they're going to give it to because someone filled out a form right. That's welfare. That's not charity. We believe in charity. We believe in giving. We believe in giving a lot, being very generous, because we've been blessed. We don't believe in welfare. So that's what I'm saying. We are going down a path right now that if we allow it to continue, if we allow Scott Bedke, Governor Brad Little, many of the others, I could go on, Wasden, if we allow these people to control the state, we will be in Oregon. And one more statistic that might shock you a little bit. Democrats outvote the Republicans 3-1 in the primaries. And if we continue with the increase of people that we're attracting, both Republicans and Democrats, or liberals and conservatives, by far the more conservatives are coming here. But they outvote us 3-1. And if we continue, mathematically, in 4.91 years, the Democrats will control the Idaho elections. That's where we're at. We have to shake this thing up right now. Now is the time to shake this thing up, or we will end up being an Oregon. And we don't want Idaho to be that. We don't. So, right here, and then I'm going to, she's the last one, I'm sorry. She's the last one I'm going to answer, and then we'll wrap up. Then I'll be done.
I want to know what you think of a voucher system for schools, so parents that teach their children at home, they homeschool, that they might get some benefits from homeschooling their children.
Yes. Oh man, you just open up a can of worms. Okay, I'm gonna lay it out and then I'm gonna be done. That's the last question. So, first of all, I strongly know, not just believe, know, that the responsibility to teach a child belongs to the parent. Okay? And it is very, very important that the state protects that right. And there are many parents who want nothing to do with the state. They don't want money. They don't want to be on a list. They don't want to opt in or opt out. Okay? They just want to be left alone to teach their children as God gave them a right to do. And that needs to be protected above all other things. Now, when it comes to our public schools, we have failed in every way. I mean, we have. Yeah, Idaho's not at the bottom of the list, but even that list is failed, right? Because of a lot of reasons, and I'm not going to get into that. But what we have to do, and as a governor, I will have to deal with it. I want to show you this. This will scare you a little bit. This is how we spend our money. Idaho spends their money this way. This is not my graph. This is the government's graph. So almost 40% goes into human and health services welfare. Almost 40% of our budget goes to welfare. Then another 35% goes to education. This is not counting property tax. This isn't at the local level. This is just at the state. We're talking about $3.2 billion a year from the state. That's not talking about the property tax that comes from the county. So we have a huge, huge responsibility here. Now, if we're going to spend this type of money in a socialist system, which our public education is a socialist system, and I really hate to talk about how we make socialist systems better. I really hate to talk about that. But it is something that we have to deal with, and I will have to deal with. But the way we do this is we apply free market principles to it. And we allow the parents to decide where the money goes because it'll follow their child. Right? We allow the parents to decide. But that's not enough. It's not enough. Because imagine where if in this little town or maybe another little town you've got 10 places to buy hamburgers. But they have to buy it from the same place. They have to make it the same way. They have to charge the same price. They have to pay their employees the same way. They have to, sell it and market it and all that the same way. What kind of hamburger are you going to get? Not going to be that great a hamburger. One guy says you're going to get a communist hamburger, right? So it's not going to be that great a hamburger. Why? There's no incentive. The owner didn't get a chance, the opportunity to decide what kind of hamburger they're going to make. And the customer, therefore, doesn't have a choice. Well, that's the same thing. If you don't free up your schools, your school administrators, your school boards, and all of that to be able to teach how they want to teach and the curriculum they want to teach, all you're doing is just making another hamburger shop. And it doesn't matter if the parents have a choice of where they're going to spend it. It's all going to be the same nasty communist hamburger. So we have to apply on both sides. You have to free up the school, the administrators, you have to free up the school boards, and make them accountable to the people, to the parents, because they control the money. And then we just might be able to take this socialist system and make it into something really great. And how do we do that? Through free market principles, by applying them. And so that's what I plan to push for. I plan to work with the legislature to push for parents' choice and to free our schools up and to be able to teach how they want to. What happens to a school in this free market scenario that I just explained? What happens to a school when they start teaching critical race theory? That's right. Parents are like, I'm not putting up with that. I'm going to take my kids out of school. Right? And they're going to go, oh, how are we going to pay our bill? We're going to lose teachers. We're going to do all of that. Stop teaching that stuff. That's what happens. Right now, the school boards just ignore the parents. The superintendents control the school board. And the teachers the teachers union control the whole thing. And it's very, very frustrating. And that's how we fix it. I believe that's how we fix it. So thank you again for your night. We're going to wrap up. Drive safe. Thank you very much.
Okay.